Hey there, welcome to episode 20 of the FFS Talk audio program. I'm your host, Dan Hugo. If you are not aware of what FFS means, you need to know more Irish people. It is an episode of a show in which we go over some things that work, some things that don't, what we can do about them. Episode 20 is being recorded on the late night, on the definitely dark evening of Wednesday, April 10, 2024. Today we're going to speak of intellectual laziness, and this is, it comes in many forms. Today is actually more focused on the internets, what isn't, and the content that we all consume nowadays, however we get it. This episode and this program included, perhaps. We already know that what you find on the internet is not always correct, but how can we tell, if we can tell at all? Maybe it begins by doing it yourself. What that means is if you take the time to create your own content, you will probably have a little bit greater insight into the sorts of things to look out for. But we'll see where we go with this episode. And as always, another topic for additional discussion. If you have ideas about what works and what does not in the age of internet information sharing, access to information and so on, come on down. Would love to have a chat, and we can record it and everything. Hopefully wherever you found this audio program, you have a episode description. Hopefully the plumbing noises are not showing up, and you'll have to check that out. Hopefully there will be an episode description with the links. The show notes includes my name, the host. If we have a guest, there's a quick summary. I will be adding an authoritative link to the FFS Talk website, so that eventually where you found this audio program may be the secondary channel collection. So publishing through Spotify and Amazon Music and so on. Ideally, you, me, everyone should own our internet presence. And it's kind of apropos for this topic for today. So, yeah, look for that. I will be updating all of my 4 audio programs starting with the Spotify presence. So that will migrate to the secondary location to find the content. They shouldn't go away unless you're using Google Podcasts. And I do need to add my account to iTunes. Just the infrastructure for podcasts, which started out to be so simple, is worthy of an episode itself, I think. In fact, maybe next week. Maybe that's something to think about. In the meantime, ideally, you will have a links section. It starts off with my shameless self-promotion, buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. I use this as a place to, there's a profile page that I can edit. The editor is not great. The presentation is not ideal, but it is a central location that I don't have to manage. That is, I don't have to fix their bad editor. It's a problem, but it's not one I can deal with, so I don't have to. I use it as what I call an out-of-band place. That is, I don't link to Buy Me a Coffee in that profile page. And so it is where you go, and then you find my other projects, productions, etc. So it is not a part of any of those projects or productions. Out of band. So buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. You do not have to buy me a coffee. You're under no obligation to spend any money, but you can if you want. So it's 90% utility, 10% value for value monetization of sorts. All of my projects are powered by coffee, so there you go. Fits together nicely. As well, my ko-fi.com/DanHugo profile, coffee.com, a different take. Once I get the new 4 websites, what I'm calling my primary points of publication for my 4 audio programs, and we'll add some other features. I would really like to enable live streaming of some sort and engage more people. My episodes are more geared towards the greater Vegas area, but not universally true. So we'll see what happens. So these are 2 ways to promote my content that don't cost me anything, and they don't need to cost you anything. So win-win, right? Frontline does some really interesting content, actually. And as with everything we find anywhere, it should always be the beginning of a search for knowledge or understanding, not necessarily the end. But Frontline did a really, really interesting take on the Boeing, the 737 MAX component. The Boeing debacle seems to only get worse day to day. But it was an absolutely fascinating video. If you want to learn how MCAS, like why is MCAS a thing, I literally just looked it up and I totally spaced on it. It's Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, MCAS. It's not something that you should ever need to worry about, yet it is one of the things that has gone horribly wrong. And if you understand why, if you understand how we being the traveling public, or the public with people that we know, care about, are concerned about, they may be the traveling public, right? So if you know someone who's going to get on a Boeing 737 MAX and you know how MCAS works or does not, you may say, hey, wait, is there an alternate form of transportation you might explore? The reason I'm including this, and I really, really tried to find the link that I wanted to include here next to this one, YouTube recommended chat content program of some sort. I had never seen it before. I let it run. I was doing other things, and there's my problem because I didn't properly bookmark it. Oh, did I? Hang on. Did I like it? We're doing a live audit. I need to tighten up my my link capture game. What is this? Not managing my links properly. Okay. Did I like? Luckily, the internet is nice and slow today. So I came upon this video, and if I can find it, I'm going to add it. These people were discussing a variety of topics. They kind of have a bro feel to the way they have structured their content, so it's not necessarily amazing. It's not necessarily valid. So it's more entertaining. The discussion itself is sort of silly. They're just, hanging out, chit-chatting. One of the people, I think it was 3 or 4 dudes, one of the people was talking about the latest Boeing controversy, and he said he ran through the basic story of the Boeing debacle, including the 737 MAX, and it's as though he read something a few weeks ago, maybe a few months ago, and then was just recalling it off the top of his head. And I apparently did not like, so I didn't save the like, unfortunately. So I have to describe it to you, because I don't want you to waste your time listening to it either way. So the person talking about this says, oh, they did something, there was some reason they did it, and so he's kind of hand-waving a lot. And the fact is, the reason that a lot of this stuff happened is spelled out in this Frontline presentation. So the difference would have been, although you can find, if you find anyone who is not a subject matter expert on aviation, aircraft design, control systems, avionics, the economies of the competition between Airbus and Boeing, what's required to roll out a new feature, a new control system, new navigation equipment, new anything on an aircraft that may require FAA, not FFS, although we can get in there if you want, FAA certification, pilot training, simulator time. So if you consume the Frontline documentary content about this, I believe you'll come away much more informed, and you'll have some interesting questions to ask yourself. If you would rely on casual commentary from bros sitting on couches, or I wish I could find the link. I really do. I would point you to the 2 minutes or so of the total content. So my bad for not saving proper bookmarks. They were just so casually incorrect with so many details. It's a minor thing, because if you're watching that show to learn more about Boeing, maybe that's good enough for you. But I took it more as an indicator, that the facts are out there. You can actually find out, especially if, like I said, if you have a real interest in what's going on with Boeing and the 737 MAX and now its other aircraft. Is the 787 manufacturing process flawed? Is it dangerous? I've been on a 787 a couple times, long haul flights. I'm very glad the wing stayed on. Technically, composites are, with adhesive bonds and so on, could be even safer than rivets and other fasteners for metals, the classic aluminum and other metals used to construct airfoils and fuselage and so on. So there's no inherent doubt that should be injected because of the way the manufacturing process should work. The question is, does it work? And so that's another thing to keep track of. I have only mentioned it here. For example, you should not, tomorrow morning or whenever you're listening to this, decide that you're no longer flying the 787 because I heard some guy say adhesive fastening of parts in the 787 fuselage might be dangerous. That is what a whistleblower may be asserting. It's the beginning of a journey of knowledge, investigation, etc. So similarly, like I said, the frontline Boeing 737 MAX presentation, totally interesting. Why MCAS was introduced, how it caused 2 aircraft to crash, some other issues that have unfolded, I guess, or become more visible as all this has unfolded, some hearings. It's really much more fascinating than these bros let on. So I was materially disappointed, and it motivated me to create this topic and this episode. And again, had I been thinking, I would have actually properly saved that link to that video. So my bad. But it's not worth your time. If you're going to watch anything, frontline video, 737 MAX, totally worthwhile if you're interested in this in general. I'm not a particular fan, I guess. I'm not particularly enamored with Jordan Peterson nor with Destiny. I know they exist. I have seen them both. Destiny is want to debate people, the debate bros. That's a whole nother thing, which may not be healthy. Jordan Peterson has his own suite of issues, and I actually think Jordan Peterson has some interesting things to say in certain areas if he stays in his lane. Interesting, not necessarily authoritative, not the last word, but thought-provoking. But he is almost certainly a poster child for going out of one's lane, getting completely off one's freeway, going out in the weeds, and then burning everything down. So Jordan Peterson and Destiny had a debate, or whatever you call these things nowadays, a extremely ideologically driven battle of words with no intention of learning or changing ideas, or sharing ideas, or changing opinions, or learning from each other, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really more about sniping and bringing along your crowd. It's like a boxing match, really. I did not watch the video of the actual debate. I watched a few minutes of it out of curiosity, and I did actually catch the part where they were talking about vaccines, where Jordan Peterson says, they're not even vaccines. And Destiny is quoting some other concepts, and they're talking about excess deaths, and they're talking about whether it was sterilizing immunity and this and that. So the interesting part for myself, and your mileage may vary, the interesting part was in situ, contemporaneously, during the time of the pandemic and the lockdowns and the vaccination, as there were variants becoming apparent and et cetera, all these things. There was a lot of really interesting and useful discussion, information sharing, and most importantly, the process of adapting policies and practices and assessments and discussions around the current state of knowledge as more data was available, as more symptoms could be measured, as spread was detected, the spread of the virus and infection rates, the characteristics of those more likely to be infected. My favorite quip about the validity of natural immunity, for example. Well, I have natural immunity. I shouldn't need vaccination. And the completely valid answer or response to that is, do you know anyone who had COVID-19 twice? Yeah. So maybe sterilizing immunity doesn't work the way you think it does. So the fact is, most people, like the vast majority, are not immunologists. They're not virologists. They're not epidemiologists. They are not. And by the way, if you have a general practice, if you're a doctor and you see patients, you are seeing a selected group of people. So not to discount your professional and technical insights, but your access to data is severely limited. So there's a lot of moving parts for a global pandemic that I don't think will be appreciated, this is my opinion, for decades to come. Maybe in time for the next pandemic, probably not. So the understanding of how scientific method, how data collection, how analysis, how adapting best practices in a public health emergency, the goal is to not, unfortunately, not necessarily true this time around, is not to win a debate and get elected, or to get your particular commercial interest funded, or ideally in a public health crisis, debate leads to better responses, leads to greater understanding, and so on. So I don't know that was achieved in our culture of debate now, which is really more about punching each other in the gut and winning by knockout, right? Not by presenting a better case, or by both people coming away saying, and people coming away saying, I had not considered all of those points, and, both coming away, or all of the parties concerned coming away better informed, or perhaps prompted to do some additional reading or investigation, new ideas on research, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all that said, like I said, I didn't really watch the whole thing. I kind of stopped there because I saw that it was going to be kind of a train wreck. Now, there is a person, and I really should have had his name so I could say it. Let me pull up my history here. I have the link, so you'd think I could just do the link. Hopefully you can't hear my dishwasher. Okay, there it is. Okay, so Debunk the Funk is, it's actually a good channel. I've watched several of his presentations over the years. It's Dr. Wilson. He goes through the arguments presented during that part. So coincidentally, he watched probably the same amount of that debate as I did, maybe a little bit more. And he went through and debunked some of the things that were being said, some of the assertions. Now, both of these people, Destiny and Peterson, and he does have a clip, relevant clip, so you don't have to watch the whole debate. They make these claims about excess deaths, about vaccination rates correlating with what's the inflammation disease? Heart inflammation, cardiac inflammation. What is it? I am totally not chronic inflammation. No. There are assertions during this debate that there were more cases of inflamed heart muscle, and why not chronic inflammation? It's cardiac inflammation. Yeah, the internet really sucks, doesn't it? Pericarditis. There you go. Jeez, pericarditis, and so it's not the heart muscle; it's the pericardium. So the pericardium is the sac, the outer sac in which your heart resides. So the pericardium would become inflamed. There are assertions made during the debate, the discussion, the argument about pericarditis rates, and what gets lost in the shuffle is, and this is something Dr. Wilson mentions specifically, and I'm not speaking as a doctor here, so I'm sort of retelling this tale. You should watch Dr. Wilson's Debunking the Funk. Totally interesting. I think it's 20 minutes. If you merely say pericarditis, first of all, that sounds like a scary word. You're like, oh, pericarditis. I don't want that. And so, the people that got vaccinated had a higher incidence of pericarditis. What's lost in that presentation is that the severity of the pericarditis in those who were not vaccinated was many times greater risk, placed the person at greater risk. And so there are some other factors to consider, but if you simplify it to merely detectable pericarditis, and you correlate that with age and whether or not young men, especially athletes, were getting a higher incidence of pericarditis. Okay, so let's dive into the details, which Dr. Wilson does. So excess deaths and some other things that they talk about. The definition of a vaccine, if it didn't provide sterilizing immunity, then it's not a vaccine, and so on and so on. So personally, I have been critical probably in at least a couple of episodes of any of my various audio programs. Certainly in real life, I've been critical of the political response. I think Dr. Fauci should never have been given a microphone nor a platform. Brad Pitt should not have portrayed him as such a hero. Perhaps someone trying to make the best of an awful situation with all sides pointing in different directions and pointing fingers in the other. But if you actually do some reading, if you actually get away from the hype and the yelling at each other and so on, if you listen to reasonable and reasoned people, subject matter experts, which is one reason I was such a fan of and continue to be a fan of the microbe.tv content. I'm not going to link to it here. I've linked to it before, and this is not an episode about the pandemic per se, but in general, Dr. Vincent Racaniello, I'm going from memory here, has one particular show, one on the microbe.tv network, if you will, called This Week in Virology, and they did obviously a very pointed and deep dive each week on the state of the SARS-CoV-2 virus and the COVID-19 illness that resulted, and long COVID. There is a Dr. Daniel Griffin, who's not only a clinician, but also a research scientist, I guess. Has a lot of letters after his name. He does actual research. He's completely familiar with the science, and he's also seeing patients and was witnessing various unpleasantries, very unfortunate scenarios, the catastrophic effects of ventilators. Maybe that was the wrong choice, right? And what did we know at the time? And it seemed, but maybe it wasn't. And so can you hold people fully accountable for making a decision based on information available, and so on and so on? So there's a lot of detail that gets lost when you have a Jordan Peterson character claiming a science background, thus he must know. And at one point he does attack Destiny for something like, how do you even know what a vaccine is? What is your background or something? So they attack each other in various ways. So if you are curious about this at all, Dr. Wilson, Debunk the Funk, really interesting, quick take. He didn't really have patience to watch the presentation either, so good for him spending his time on better things. Subject matter experts, they are out there, and so finding them and bookmarking them is a good idea. I posted a link to a guy who stands in front of a whiteboard and lays it down, completely solving the JFK assassination again. So I find this to be an interesting topic because I think it's only getting more popular again. Oliver Stone is releasing, or has released, the book about the movie, I think it's called, where he releases the entire script and some background information and some other content as a book about the making of the JFK movie. There are ongoing engagements concerning events and new information as it unfolds, and releases of documents, and why hasn't there still been a 100% release of all documents? So it's kind of the gift that keeps on giving. I find it an interesting thing. I also find it interesting just how much time people spend on presenting their theories and building them up, seemingly without necessarily recognizing the work of others. So they come up with their own thing and they're like, solved. I find that if you're going to delve into this, if you watch America's Untold Stories, I think it is, Mark Grobert, and Eric Hunley, they have a particular political slant on things, but they do an interesting job of talking about conspiracies and so on. So if you are into that, it's an interesting presentation. They do a lot of cross-referencing and a lot of mentioning of other people who have done similar research that agrees and disagrees and so on. It is opinionated, but it is interesting that they do spend that time, and they've spent a tremendous amount of time, almost an unreasonable amount of time. But I find it interesting that one person can spend some money on a whiteboard marker and get a YouTube channel going and take some serious time, some actual effort to draw on a whiteboard, and lay down their theory about the assassination. It may be restating some things. It may be making some references that have been debunked, a whole collection of things. But if you examine the facet that that person presents, you will come away thinking, well, yeah, that's it. That's all there is to know. And there's a lot of stuff to know, and there's a lot of things that one might think you need to know that it ends up being dead ends and bunk and so on. So I find the entire topic fascinating, if only because of the way research is conducted, the way research is shared, the way the internet has a quote unquote allowed those research projects, those efforts to be presented, to be referenced across, to each other. You could actually link a ton of these presentations together and show, commonalities and compare and contrast the actual theories and the components. And so it's interesting. Nobody does that unless you are super duper engaged. So there's a whole little micro community of people that are bent on this. And I find it interesting just from an evidentiary procedure, government investigation / information sharing / cover up perspective. Nothing I do, say, understand, announce will have any impact whatsoever. So it's not just like national politics. It's interesting, but at the end of the day, I can't do anything about it. So capitalism is not physics. So if you've ever consumed any content from Dr. Sabine Hassenfelder, I hope I get that right. She is a really smart, really interesting physicist in Germany. She talks about Einstein, among other characters. Really interesting content. It's, I think her show is the science without the gobbledygook or something. So she cuts to the chase. She'll talk about the JWT, the James Webb, JWST, Space Telescope, and its findings. She'll sometimes talk about the multi-world, is it multi-world? Hypothesis, quantum physics, multiple parallel universes, from a scientific perspective or from a informed scientific perspective. So those are interesting. So that's I say staying in your lane, and other people say the same thing. When you get a character like Sabine, Dr. Hassenfelder, who, am I saying her name correctly? Let me make sure. Sabine Hassenfelder, yes. I think it's Sabine. I think the German pronunciation is Sabine. I think some might say Sabina, but I think it's Sabine. Anyway, Dr. Hassenfelder, she's kind of curmudgeonly, which I appreciate. So she will debunk or otherwise comment on colleagues in the physics arena when they start, arguing about string theory or geometric unity, if you're a Weinstein fan, or the theory of everything that Wolfram is proposing. So she gets in there and she will, she'll say, show me the money, show me the facts, show me this, the details. So I think she's a good force to have, sort of the voice of reason or the voice of dissent, which is good. Otherwise you end up with people, patting each other on the back and everybody, yeah, that's probably right. And then she will come along and say, hang on. So I appreciate that. Now, what happens when someone who has subject matter expertise decides they're going to go out and change lanes, get off the freeway, go out driving across the country roads, and she starts talking about trans issues, or the one I'm linking to here, she describes capitalism. Now, she kind of went off the rails, and she got spanked, slapped, clapped back, however that works. A lot of responses to this were essentially, you're a physicist, not an economist. So some of her takes were wrong. Personally, I found the initial take. Now, a lot of people make this mistake, and it's an easy mistake to make. And you actually have to look through history and maybe reason a bit about the nature of currency and why there's a national currency for a given state, country. So why do we need the dollar? Oh, because it makes bartering easier. Well, that seems great on the surface until you realize, well, money's been around for a lot longer than the U.S. dollar has. So why were the Romans, issuing currency, right? The coin of the realm and its eventual undoing. Hey, why are there those ridges on the edges of coins? It's so you can't shave off the edges, steal a little powdered silver, or sometimes gold. So when you control the currency, when you have the coin of the realm, you get to control the policy of your economy. That is, who's spending on what on where. You get to tax people. Guess what happens when you have to pay taxes? You have to make money so you can pay those taxes. So you get to have a foot in the door, a hand in the jet stream, however you want to look at it. The government is a part of the movement of capital, the valuation of control of monetary policy. If you look at the mess that the Greek economy got itself into, however you want to look at who was driving that, the Greek economy, they decided they're going to jump in on the euro, and the euro was not pleasant to the Greek economy, and so they could no longer print money. They could no longer leverage their autonomous currency. So they were kind of left to their own devices. When you look at the United States of America with 50 states all united, the fact that there is a common currency, and of course the interstate commerce clause is a headache. But if you look at that, the United States gets to set the monetary policy of the country and how it interacts with China, Europe, different countries in Europe. If you have a recognized currency that can be backed by the full faith and credit of a country versus gold, that's a debate that's coming up again. It always does. Then you can do certain things, tariffs and giving money to other countries so that they may buy your goods. So some will argue that you're giving money to other countries, but they're buying stuff from American manufacturers. In this case, the one we're all thinking of as I'm speaking right now, they're spending money on arms or other resources. So it's a path of injection into our local economy, national economy, through a third party. So it's just an economic pathway, right? So when you say that money, currency, was created to ease bartering, that's not really valid. Anyone can barter at any time. That's what markets are for. You can do swaps. You can, and if you've ever worked in any industry, you know that occasionally there will be, hey, I can get you this if you got some of those. I can't get my parts I need for my supply chain, but if you have some, but you need some of the other parts that I have, we can swap parts, right? So there's always a way to do bartering. You don't necessarily need currency. You can use the prevailing rates to do some sort of equity adjustments for these barterings, but in general, the value proposition is to your manufacturing processes or making your deliverables and so on. But the point of the story is she made the assumption that the history of money is rooted in bartering, when in fact it is rooted in control of a population from a top-level government, and the currency itself is backed by that government. So it's a way to exert control on a global geopolitical marketplace and to conduct various negotiations and relations in how the money is moved and exchanged and so on. MMT is divisive and controversial, but if you look at a deep dive into how the accounting works of, for example, when other countries buy bonds or they purchase American debt and what happens to that money and where it goes, the value of having a reserve currency floating around the globe in vast quantities and the demand that people have or countries have for that, et cetera, et cetera. It's a much more complicated tale, totally interesting. And I am not an economist, but it is definitely worth diving into if you ever want to know how money works and how it doesn't. The fiat currency debate for cryptocurrencies versus, if it's not backed in gold. And I always ask people, well, what is gold worth? And they'll tell you how much it's worth in dollars. Same with Bitcoin. So the other question, of course, is, well, if you value your money, I would rather have all my money in gold. I want to have hard currency. And if you are a Atlas Shrugged fan, you know that that's part of the story, is a movement to the US dollar in actual hard gold coin. And that's fine if you find other people that will take gold. It's hard to deposit gold into some banks. It's hard to conduct business with gold. It's a little bit heavy. It's hard to transfer over any distance. But most importantly, if you want to buy a house in gold, if you want to hand over $100,000, remember when people could buy a house for $100,000? But if you say, I want to buy this house in gold, so now you have to deal with moving $100,000 worth of gold around. And that might not be so much right now because gold is very valuable. So it's maybe it would fit in your pocket for all, who knows. But the fact is, if there were to come a time when suddenly the world has collapsed, guess what? I don't need gold. I need food. I need water. I need ammunition. So now the gold becomes the exact same thing that Dr. Hassenfelder was mentioning. It becomes a means of bartering. But really, at the end of the day, I just want the bullets. The gold becomes less and less valuable. There's a really good Twilight Zone episode on the bank robbers who take the gold and then they go hide in the desert in a cave. They seal themselves into these little sarcophagi, little coffins. For one of them, it is a coffin. And they sleep for however many decades, and they wake up in a future where they are no longer criminals, because who remembers those guys who stole all that gold? And now they're in the middle of the desert with backpacks full of gold, or bags or whatever it was. And the two survivors have to try to get there, and I think one of them kills the other one, smacks him in the head with a gold bar or something. I didn't watch it ahead of this episode. It's a good episode, though. And at the end, a car, a futuristic vehicle, comes upon the final surviving gold thief, and the final words are him saying, I need some water. I have all this gold. Take it. Take as much as you want. I just need water. And I think he dies. I think he's completely dehydrated. And I think it's two people. Yeah, it's two people in a car. They're talking to him, so they've gotten out of the car. And one says to the other, it's funny. He thought this was actually worth something. Or words to those effect. So the take home is that gold itself, it has only really extrinsic value unless you're spinning gold for maybe you're making a scanning electron microscope, or you are in need of gold filament, gold wiring for some electronics. Maybe you're putting gold on the fingers of a PCIe interface card, or maybe whatever it is, right? You are doing something with electronics. Gold has nice connectivity, low corrosivity. It's a good industrial metal, and it's also very shiny. So extrinsically, I want that gold because it's shiny. And having more gold, if you are a Daffy Duck fan, it's mine, mine, mine. But at the end of the day, water, food, a way to defend yourself, shelter, security, food, water, survivor stuff. So Maslow, gold may not satisfy those. So it's an interesting path to go down. The take home, though, just like Jordan Peterson, you've got a professor of physics talking about capitalism, talking about economic considerations, and starts off with a fundamental misconception about the money part of capitalism, or markets in general. So it was not a good look, and you have to be able to question presentations from people who are conferred credibility without necessarily having it. Next link, two people, and I'm spending a ton of time on the links, so I better rattle through this quickly. The two people who should not be debating transgender anything, Neil deGrasse Tyson and Ben Shapiro. I have a link to that video. Kind of a train wreck. I think too many people are weighing in on things that don't have a direct impact on them. So if Jordan Peterson, Neil deGrasse Tyson, these are people who, Bill Nye, the science guy, even Sabine Hassenfelder, people who have a scientific background, who will say, well, I speak the language of science, so therefore I will opine on a topic that I am not a subject matter expert on. I have no subject matter expertise in this area, but I am a scientist. Back off, man. I'm a scientist if you are a Ghostbusters fan. So Neil deGrasse Tyson has his views on the spectrum of gender identity, Ben Shapiro has his heavy religious take. They are debating. It's almost just for the sake of entertainment, right? At the end, is the gladiator going to ask, "Are we not entertained by this show of controversy?" So I found I only watched about half of that one, and I watched it some time ago. It gets to be silly because neither of these people are making their cases based on reality. They're just making it based on their views. And of course, that's my view of their views. So a debate for the sake of debate. And we are in a profit-driven eyeball attention economy, which I'm sure Sabine Hassenfelder has views on since she has monetized her expertise effectively. Just don't talk about the capitalism part. There's a quote that I'm sure you've heard. Truth is, the lie travels halfway around the world while truth is putting its shoes on, boots on, pants on. There's a really interesting rundown from the quote investigator on the origins of that quote. It is often attributed to Mark Twain incorrectly. It is often attributed as well in various forms and variations of the wording and so on over centuries. So I'm always heartened to see an article like this, and this sort of goes to the point. So not only the quote itself and its origins, but a website like this where people actually do research. They actually find references, historical or otherwise, the missing references. Someday if you're bored, look up the be the change in the world you want to see, and who said or maybe did not say that. What is it? Insanity. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing twice and expecting different results. Never said by Einstein, so stop thinking that, etc., etc. So if you actually investigate the assertions that people make, and you can start with quotes, you will find that most of the time people are saying things because they heard them, not because they were actually said by the person who receives the credit or attribution. It's probably more credible that people think Einstein said this of insanity. By the way, if you come to Vegas and you play craps, you are clearly insane. Think about the rules of that game. So the quote is a good one, but the quote itself, the origin from wherever you might choose to start its origin, is long before the internet. So this is when getting the word from here to there took some effort, took some energy and time. And now you can spread that lie or half-truth all the way around the world before any sort of, and they always say fact-checking someone, if they can start rattling off ridiculous arguments, fact-checking takes 10x the time. So it's really cheap to make a bogus assertion, as if you do take in the Jordan Peterson destiny arguments, and if you just watch the vaccination part, the claims that are being made on both sides, if no one is fact-checking them in situ, then you can sit there and listen, and you might think, oh yeah, wow, Jordan's made a really good case, and Destiny's also made a really good case. But then later, when you go through the actual data, the things that they may have been referencing, because if you don't have any references, then you just say things. Maybe he was talking about this. And if you actually do that fact check, you will find, the truth is not necessarily on either side of that presentation. It might be somewhere else entirely. The truth based on data. And of course, data becomes information. Information might eventually become understanding. So who knows? I like Simon Whistler. I think if you're going to watch information content on YouTube, I like Simon Whistler. I believe he's producing about 80% of YouTube's content at this point. Even his About page doesn't have everything that he's working on, but a really interesting format, a very human take on things. He's unabashedly opinionated on some of the topics, and mostly understandably, if it's a retrospective on a horrible criminal who killed, young people, he doesn't hold back on rendering his opinions. And then, halfway through a story, perhaps there might be, oh, this guy seems okay. It seems like now that we know the other half of so he'll let loose on his own editorializing, which is interesting because he's telling the story as though you are there with him, right? So he's almost conversationally expressing his opinions. But the other thing is he's not trying to present, in my opinion, he's not trying to present with an agenda. He's presenting a story and has his human responses to it. So I like that style. I think it's an interesting way of hearing, learning, considering, pondering. As with anything else on the internet or anywhere else, it's rarely the end of your quest for knowledge. So if you watch a Simon Whistler video and you'd like to learn more, you should always treat it as the beginning. If someone tells you something and you believe them, well, that's how we've gotten into the mess we're in many cases. I have a couple of things that you should learn about in general. Mott and Bailey. The Mott and Bailey fallacy. You present a easy case that you will agree, like, hey, this is the vaccines, or no, I was just watching an awful PBD, Patrick Bet David, YouTube episode. That guy and his whole panel of goofballs, only problematic. Nuggets of interesting now and then, but they're quite ridiculous in my opinion. Schiff, what's his name? Paul Schiff? Brian, what's his name? The name is Peter Schiff. Peter Schiff is on rambling about all manner of things. And so he sets up for example, young people voting was all about getting more votes for the Democratic Party. So bringing the voting age from 21 to 18 brought more votes for the Democrats, and they were able to win. And then they had student loans because you got to promise them something, so they're going to vote, and you're going to be able to go to college. And so he sets up the premise, and you're like, okay, yeah, they did lower the voting age, and there was a shift in voting demographics, perhaps. And okay, sounds okay. You say, and then that leads to all manner of things. And another part of the Mott, I think I have that right. The easy part is. Because of student loans, guaranteed student loans, the cost of tuition in college has gone up, which is arguably true. But then he makes the assertion that this allows people to attend college for free and that they've gotten something for nothing, and they've become so used to handouts and not receiving anything. But the value proposition of an educated public is very different. So his Bailey, I almost want to check and make sure I have that order correctly stated. Mott and Bailey. Am I saying Mott correctly? It's not Mode, is it? It's Motte. But, oh yeah. Yeah, pronunciation is Mott. If you look at an image, if you look at the Wikipedia page, it looks like it might be a moat, but a moat is Moat. So the Mott is the defense. So you set up a Mott, you set up the, young people voting, college tuition. And then the Bailey is like, and therefore, that's how we got into the trouble we're in, because people don't want to work anymore and school sucks and it's overpriced. And you're like, you made a simple argument that's hard to argue against, and now you made a more complicated argument based on that simple argument, and so therefore also difficult to argue against. So the Mott and Bailey fallacy is, I'll just read it real quick, is a form of argument and an informal fallacy where an arguer conflates two positions that share similarities, one modest and easy to defend, that's the Mott, and one much more controversial and harder to defend, the Bailey. So asserting that young people, because the voting age was lowered and because of access to student loans, and then of course that leads to higher tuition, you're like, yeah. So you've set up the Mott, and then you make this assertion that it's a something for nothing problem and this and that. But in fact, an informed and educated public is an investment in the future and so on. So I think Mark Blythe has much better commentary on this than the Schiff character, a much more reasoned investment-based approach. If you invest in your population and you educate them, ultimately the return just from your tax base is substantially worthwhile. The forgiveness of student loans, for example, those are just monies that have been invested in future returns on the education that people have received. So you could argue probably more successfully that people should not be receiving funding for education in useless areas, but then you have to get into defending useless, right? Being more of a doctor or a lawyer, the classic paths to success. Well, no, you should be an AI data scientist now. Well, what if you want to be a writer or a poet, or you want to learn about art history? No, those aren't worth anything. Well, they kind of are. Depends on how you view culture and society, right? So the Mott and Bailey, check that out. Make sure I'm pronouncing it correctly. The confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is something we always get when we watch content or a presentation, or we listen to or read words espoused by a person we agree with. Like, yes, they're my same political party, my same religion, my same tribe, right? They look like me, they act like me, they went to the same school, they grew up in the same hometown. There's all sorts of identities that can bolster credibility. And so confirmation bias happens when you're hearing things that yes, I agree with that. And so I agree with everything else they're saying. And yeah, it's like a snowball. Or consider this. And if you, and I'm getting ahead of myself on the notes, but if you saw Miss America, the Howard Stern movie, you heard that tale. The people who love Howard Stern were listening to an average of like 90 minutes, and the people who hated him were listening an average of like 120 minutes, whatever the numbers were. So people that hated Howard Stern tended to listen more. Well, when you hate someone, they're only confirming your hatred of them. Every word they say is only reinforcing your own beliefs of disagreement with them. You know, if he says the sky is blue and you're like, no, the sky is red, he's only confirming that you are correct because he has lost credibility with you, and that's generally true. So confirmation bias, more commonly used in its traditional form, but if you really think about it, confirmation bias can be used antithetically, completely opposite, and have a similar effect, right? So if you choose to listen to presenters of various media with whom you vehemently disagree, their words and messaging and so on serve to bolster your own beliefs to the contrary. And so it fuels your rage quoting, rage clicking, rage reacting, and so on. Arguably a better path to monetization when you think about it. Motivated reasoning, the last of the links. If you're going to construct, say, a reaction video, and you want to make a point, your motivated reasoning will aid you in selecting excerpts that bolster your point. So motivated reasoning is, I would like to reach a conclusion. I would like to present a certain case. If you've ever been in a courtroom, the prosecutor is going to present a case that favors prosecution. They're not going to present all the evidence that makes the suspect or the defendant, I guess, innocent. Right? They want to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt in a criminal case. So the prosecutor and the defense likewise are using motivated reasoning. They're presenting a case with a particular agenda. So there's a time and a place for motivated reasoning. The truth lies somewhere in between, perhaps. But it is important to recognize when motivated reasoning is rearing its head while you're watching TikTok videos or other. I want you to watch my video. So I want you to be extremely happy or extremely angry while doing so. What I say during it may not matter, but if you are looking for confirmation that the pink stuff is delicious, or that I should jump up and down on my Lamborghini with heels on, or whatever, right? There's something for everybody. Those are not really good examples of motivated reasoning. But if you are looking for reinforcement of your own notions, that confirmation bias, as you construct your own understanding of things, you may be motivated to select evidence, pieces of data, pieces of insight that confirm what you're thinking, but also support your notions. If you just want to make an assertion, and there's a really good book. It was about the scout versus the soldier. I got to stop doing this during show lookups. Scout, soldier, Julia Galef. Soldiers and Scouts. That's not the book. The Scout Mindset is the book. So part of the book, they go into some motivated reasoning stories from French history, I think, about how you can convict. So the motivated reasoning outside of the courtroom is not good, because if you build a case against someone without the oversight of judges and process and legal checks and balances, motivated reasoning allows you to convince a crowd, say the internet, that people are guilty of things by presenting a certain case and dredging up certain old, out of context statements and actions and videos and so on. So motivated reasoning is sort of a strategy to convince people to agree with you, or to convince yourself even. It's worth understanding better than I have presented here. So I think these three and more in the collection of fallacies and biases and so on are important to understand and to at least be familiar with. If not fully understood, maybe you should engage with them yourself, in fact. So at long last, 1 hour in, give or take, I'm to the show notes, which I will ramble through quickly because it's already past midnight now on April 11th. So what are you consuming? The internet has enabled anyone to say or do anything anywhere at any time. This is the greatest change of human civilization one could ever possibly understand when you really think about it. So I've just made that up, but similar points have been argued. The notion of being able to contact and communicate with anyone on the planet nearly instantaneously with, as long as you have appropriate hardware between you, is amazing. And language translation enables even more. So you can essentially share ideas with anyone, anywhere, anytime. So the platform on which you choose to assert your truth may not allow you to do that, though. If you are concerned about your free speech, remember that free speech in the United States, anyway, is guaranteed from perspective of the government. So the government is not supposed to be able to pass laws abridging that freedom of speech. They do not get to tell Twitter that they have to publish. Now, this is the various controversies aside about laptops and whatnot, but generally speaking, and the example I always give is if you have a blog or you publish a thing, if you wrote a book, you have the right to publish that book. But a book publisher does not have the requirement to enforce your right to publish that book. And likewise, if you publish that book and your publisher says, okay, I will publish your book, I do not have a right to say, well, I want you to include my stuff in that book because I also have a freedom of speech. So the line between government, freedom of speech, public square, public resources to fund and enable communications and public squares and so on, all of these things and the guarantees are applied to the government's involvement in the expression of ideas. So ideally, the government would not censor commercial entities, ideally, but YouTube is under no obligation to publish your views and opinions. It's up to their advertisers, so that's a whole nother concept, perhaps. But and as I said, truth can travel halfway around the world. No, a lie. Let me fix my notes there. A lie can travel halfway around the world. The truth is just putting on its whatever. And this is important because anybody who complains that I should be able to say whatever I want to say on the internet, and YouTube and Twitter and TikTok and Snap and Facebook and LinkedIn and they should all allow me to because freedom of speech, without any moderation whatsoever, unrestricted in any way, free speech becomes very noisy. The cacophony can be overwhelming. And if the most popular voices are the most wrong, there should be some consideration there. I'm not saying to disallow, but as a publisher or as a platform, taking responsibility for what you are allowing to spread by paying for said platform upkeep and maintenance and additional features. It's a controversial thing. User-generated content it's not a simple matter, but it is interesting, I think, to note that there is no regulation on veracity, on legitimate and responsible research that drives the speech that is spread so freely. So interesting, and it's something to consider when you are consuming these presentations in whatever form. Is this person doing it for the money, or are they honest? Are they credible? Algorithms are your friend, though, and they always give you the best, most useful information in rank order for your benefit. So if you've seen it on Google, it's as good as fact. And none of what I just said is true at all, explicitly. Some people do good stuff. Like I said, I'm a fan of Simon Whistler. There are plenty of people who tackle a subject, and maybe it's something that they're a subject matter expert in academically and professionally, or maybe it's a deeply held interest, hobby. There's a guy, I don't really watch his show, but there's a guy who's like really into swords. So whenever there's anything with either, whether it's a lightsaber or a samurai movie or anything with it's not a ranged weapon. It's anyway, swords, swinging a sharpened metal thing at somebody. The level of detail, the level of practical example. He has the garb, he has the equipment. He will go through the strategy, the handling of the weapons, the way that you would offend and defend oneself with these weapons. Totally interesting. I assume I'm not interested enough to question his credibility or veracity, but I assume that he's putting in this time because he really loves it and he really knows what he's talking about. So there are people that do these sorts of things and they monetize their videos. So, there's money to be made, but an honest question would be, are you doing this for the money, or is the money doing this for you? In other words, I love doing what I do and the money comes in because I express that love and it's quality product and everybody loves what I'm doing and so on. So I believe there are people that do things like that. Simon Whistler is totally interesting to me, just that whole story. The fact that I don't even know how he fits time in his day to have a family and to sleep and to wear his waterproof sneakers that he's enamored with, but quite a YouTube presence. And he seems like a normal person. And so I think when people present themselves and their presentation of data and information and documentary and opinion and so on can all be sort of dissected and understood, like, I know you're giving us your opinion right now and so on. I think there's some value there. And if people share their expertise, knowledge, insights, time spent researching and learning in a form that passes that along to others, and then they happen to also be able to pay their bills, that's probably laudable. I would say mostly laudable. It's when people throw together content for the sake of views and likes and monetization. That's where you have to start questioning things, sensationalism and so on. I've covered the history of yellow journalism in a previous episode or two, so that can happen. But even the best of us have a bias, and if you yourself create something, you will start off with a particular viewpoint, and that will flavor your research and your presentation, and the production itself, right? So you start off with an idea. You may choose to disprove it. If you have a falsifiable conclusion, try to falsify it. And along the way, you will learn, what I thought may be completely true. Or, it turns out there are some things I didn't know when I made my initial hypothesis, right? So you come up with your presentation, you produce a interesting audio program such as this, perhaps, or a visually appealing, or not even authentically. How about authentically produced YouTube video, etc.? Those are interesting. I think that's some of the most interesting content out there. People taking advantage of the platform to present their ideas in a way that is credible and ultimately useful. And I again will point to Simon Whistler, but there are so many that do some really interesting work. And because I am not making life-changing decisions based on what they tell me, I will take them at their word until such time as I treat them as the beginning of a learning journey. So if Simon Whistler tells me something and I say, that's interesting, I should read more about that. And then I do. Unfortunately, we are in the age of reaction videos. Like nowadays, there are people I've understood to hear. Some people will say, wait, I got to make a video about this. So the way that they respond or share an opinion or view is to get in front of a camera of some sort, record a video, perhaps stream it live, interact with people, and so on. Interesting. So the reaction video has become a popular thing. Started off, I think, on the gamer on Twitch, people gaming, and you could assault each other's gameplay with opinions and poop talking, keeping it clean. So you could respond to memes and humor, and then suddenly you're responding to news of the day and what other people are saying. And this is something interesting, by the way, the tendency for casual content creators that is not professionally trained journalism and companies and producers with funding and any sense of ethics and professionalism. So more and more of the internet seems to be about itself, as in, I mentioned Dr. Wilson and Debunking the Funk. His video is about another video and two other content creators. So I think there's utility in what he presents, but only because of the other presentation. So he could have presented everything he presented as a standalone presentation without reacting and debunking the other video. So there is value in the debunking part because that Jordan Peterson Destiny video is out there, and it's not necessarily a valid bolus of information, at least concerning the COVID-19 and vaccines and so on. But there is a tremendous amount of content now sniping at each other, excerpting shows in a motivated reasoning fashion to create a popular clickbaitable reaction clip video show thing, sniping on each other's practices, on relationships, of course, on who showed up where and did what to whom and who got it on video and what other comments happened, and somebody tweeted about something else. So it's a lot of inside baseball and a lot of, when the news people become the news. That's always been a problem historically in the world of journalism. So when the YouTubers become the YouTube video of others, that seems like a similar challenge that we should recognize, at least. Like, do I really want to watch this person snipe at this other person all day? And a lot of people would say yes to that. So now we have political reactors, people that spend their... And by the way, if you're a fan of Fark from the day, Fark.com, I don't think Fark is at its former level of greatness, but it was literally a website of snarky headlines. So you would take a headline with a crafted headline by an editor, and you would post it, but you would create your own headline, and they would tag it like the Florida tag, whatever. So Fark was all about snarky comment in headline form to link to an article. So that's essentially what the headline writers are doing anyway. So now you have political reactors, and Hassan Piker, Hassanabi, is very popular, arguably one of the most popular on Twitch. He streams on Twitch, and then his videos come from the Hassanabi Army, the Hassanabi Clip Industrial Complex. I think that's what he calls it. So he does not do any copyright striking or anything to prevent people from clipping his show. He performs for like 8+ hours each day on stream, as they say. And he'll comment on various things. And some of his opinions are informed, at least. He's done the reading. I don't agree with a lot of what he says. I find some of it interesting, some of it agreeable, a lot of it not. But he does his thing for 8+ hours a day, probably longer often. Eats on camera. Luckily, he has a bathroom nearby, so he leaves frame every once in a while, which is good. So people will clip his show. They'll say, well, let's take the 1 hour or the 40 minutes or the 20 minutes where he was getting in some good ones on Jon Stewart or Malcolm Gladwell, whatever. Right? Like Hassan reacts to Jon Stewart, or Hassan reacts to John Oliver, Piers Morgan, Andrew Tate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the clip shows, you can see the same clip edited in 25 or 30 or 50 or 100 different ways. So you got to get that clickbait headline title of your YouTube video, which is a clip show of a different Twitch stream. So now you have to be sensational. You have to have a really attractive thumbnail, and you have to edit the show together so that it's appealing. Maybe some quick edits, maybe some some supercuts of interesting clips that are quick and stimulate the two brain cells. So that's interesting, I suppose. But you are then seeing a highly crafted excerpt or excerpts of what could have been in the actual original form useful or interesting, or even in the reaction form. Mostly he spends his 8+ hours reacting to the stream as it's happening, or to a video in its entirety, sometimes sped up, so it'll be a 2x or something. But the fact is, that's too long for people. So let's cut that down to 7 minutes or 14 minutes. And so what are you losing? You're getting a crafted version, and to make them sensational and clickbaity and money making. And I believe Hassan has said, and I don't really watch his show very much anymore, but I think he's commented that the people doing the clip shows make more on his content than he does. Certainly true if you sum up all of the different people that are creating these clip shows. End of the day, there's money to be made. You don't have to do anything. You just have to edit the work of others. And in some cases, you don't even have to do that. So with the reaction videos are monetized, everything is, the goal may be to provide a useful, valid response as a reactor. So if you were to allow the people in the original video, so suppose Dr. Was it Wilson? So Debunk the Funk, if he had Destiny and Jordan on in some capacity to interact with his commentary, I think that would be extremely valuable. But that's never going to happen. So it's too bad. More likely, the selection of a thumbnail and a provocative title and selective editing can make the reaction video more popular than the original. So just wanted to close out my final bullet item in that section, kind of repeating myself, but it bears repeating. Confirmation bias and algorithms. I have to be honest, I didn't think this show would be this long. It is interesting to me to reflect on all these things and assemble them in this way. I hope it is interesting to you as well. Perhaps you will listen to this some years later as part of my memoirs or some autobiographical compilation. But let it be said that I express these notions. So confirmation bias, if my goal is to keep you listening to my content, so don't go away, and I make money based on your time consuming it, like every 6 seconds I get another whatever checkbox or score value increase or whatever. So the more time you spend consuming my content, the greater my profit is, or some sort of returns. I want you sticking around and agreeing with me. So I've already referred to this, that your confirmation bias could come in the form of agreement, and you're like, yeah, I like everything Dan's saying. He totally gets me. So I'm confirming your notions with my motivated reasoning in how I construct my presentations. Or maybe you hate me and you want to consume everything I say so you can pick it apart. You can do a reaction video. You can use it against me sometime later in the future, like compile a supercut of all the times I said poop. I've said that a lot. Poopification. Shout out to Cory Doctorow. So people that hate, the haters, the people that are only going negative, they are also, by the opposite confirmation, they are just the fact that I am saying it confirms that they are correct, because I am most definitely wrong. So if you agree with the presenter or you completely disagree with them, confirmation bias is still going to be one of the things that you come away with, because Dan said it, I know I was right, because he clearly is an idiot. But confirmation bias in the traditional form, very much alive and well. You want to hear people that agree with you and vice versa. So, you want to hear from people who you agree with and they agree with you. They may not want to talk to you in the slightest. But this is where the networks, the entertainment divisions of various companies that are now our network news and the news cycle will create content that is tailored to their audience. And this has been shown countless times. If you watch, say, an MSNBC and Fox News take on the same story, you'll find different types of information are shared in different ways and so on. So ideally, you read both, or you listen to both, or you watch both, or multiple sources, and construct your own view, I guess, your own version of the truth, which lies so often somewhere between the various forms. Staying in one's lane is something I already commented on. If Dr. Hassenfelder would talk about physics all day, and I know she has, completely valid, completely credible. She has some really interesting thoughts on, how even down to peer review of papers and assertions and new theories, and what should we do about string theory, and what should we whoever we is, what should we do about the many worlds hypothesis? Is that what it is? Multiple universes, many worlds. I think it's many worlds hypothesis. In general, just a curmudgeonly critical view of other people's assertions, I think, is completely valid in the world of silence, in the world of science, which should always be tuning itself to the latest available information and understanding of it. So I think there's absolutely a place for people like Dr. Hassenfelder, and I think she's completely credible in that field. When she wants to talk about trans and capitalism and some other topics that she's wandered into, there are people waiting for her. Because if you're an awesome physicist, it doesn't mean you are also awesome at all the other things. Completely agree with that as well. Neil deGrasse Tyson, also, he's a great personality. He's very excited. I think he's genuinely and sincerely excited about astrophysics and about science, and about young people learning about these things, getting into STEM. His path is noteworthy and should be emulated and should be enabled for others if they're not able to emulate it. But there should be an awareness of this interest at all ages, and when is the best time to turn that interest into some enabling and encouragement. Hey, you should come to the planetarium, even if you're only 5, because 20 years from now, you're going to be driving this thing. Right. So to be able to make that connection and enable, those are great things. Should Neil deGrasse Tyson be my go-to resource when it comes to trans rights or climate change or there's so many things. Some of his movie reviews maybe go a little bit far. So these are normal people when they are not in their subject matter expertise mode. So now, do I really want to know what Sabine and Neil deGrasse Tyson think about trans rights? And I myself am not trans. I'm a cis person. So I could express my opinions, I guess, but there would just be opinions of a casual bystander. And in these cases, they're probably the same. So what makes Dr. Hassenfelder or Dr. Tyson or Ben Shapiro or any of these opinions any more valid or any more noteworthy or more deserving of spending time watching them, especially fake debates as take place now? I don't know. So if we are willing to confer credibility and our attention on people who are subject matter in one area, but who decide to escape to others, and the common expression you'll hear from the science characters, Bill Nye, deGrasse Tyson, everybody, I speak the language of science. And I've said this, something similar, like, yeah, I read the paper. I am not a virologist. I'm not an epidemiologist. But during the pandemic, I read the research papers. I took a short course on epidemiology from Johns Hopkins, online, of course, so that I could understand the terminology and so on. Am I a subject matter expert? No. Should my views and opinions be trusted amongst the opinions expressed by real epidemiologists? Absolutely not. I am informed for myself in that I, quote unquote, speak the language of science. In my academic backgrounds and so on. Am I a subject matter expert? No. So if these various characters I've already mentioned, Hassenfelder, Tyson, Nye, etc., they speak the language of science, and that's great for their own uses, for their own dinner table conversations at home, etc. But if you're going to, in the same breath, talk about astrophysics and trans rights and convince your audience that you have the same credibility discussing both when you only have credibility discussing one. And this is not to say that a scientist can certainly have, I'm not saying that a scientist cannot also have subject matter expertise or completely valid insights into other topics, but not automatically just because you understand what peer review, scientific method, that doesn't always apply and it doesn't always save you. And also, I believe Richard Dawkins, who has his own issues, I just caught a clip of him saying something like, when it comes to the biology stuff, I got it. When it comes to the physics stuff, I don't got it. So I have to talk to he didn't say those words exactly, but so he understands his own limitations and doesn't try to make assertions on even areas of science that are not within his purview. And I think knowing that and saying that up front so that people consuming his views and opinions and his content will not automatically say, well, Dawkins said this about these other things that he has no idea what he's talking about. So therefore, A, what he said being incredible, not credible, should be recognized as such, and B, should not disqualify the views, opinions, and information and insights he expressed about things he is an expert in. So recognizing those two things, differences and so on, is important. It's an analytical skill that we will only need to tune more and more into the future. I promise we're almost to the end. Doing my own research. Are you fond of doing that? I did my own research, so I know. I have some bad news for you, but I also have some good news. So I'm going to start with the bad news. Doing your own research does not mean finding YouTube or TikTok videos that confirm your own notions, confirmation bias. If you are not a subject matter expert and you do not speak an adjacent or relevant language of science or whatever, it could also be the language of culinary arts or the language of sculpting, it could be anything. It doesn't have to be science. If you are not a subject matter expert, though, you will need to trust your sources. The Dawkins example, for example, you can check your sources, by the way, but do you? So if you're not a subject matter expert in something else and you listen to a friend of yours and they tell you their opinion and you say, oh, okay, well, I know you, I trust you, I know your background, I'm going to accept you tell me with all of that as credibility. Great. Hey, I saw a guy on Joe Rogan, so therefore he must be credible. That, for me, does not work. So you don't necessarily know everything. You can understand and accept that, and then make sure you trust people who fill in those gaps and do some research on the research if you are able. But there is some good news. There is no shortage of actual research material available online. What used to mean, and I did this when I was younger, a trip to the library, countless hours to perhaps years, seeking the truth. And if you've ever gone to a law library, for example, there was an engineering or science, I think it was engineering library at Arizona State University. I used to like to go there. There are various science or medical or legal or other types of libraries that consolidate materials, printed or otherwise, for doing this research. So the internet has made all that super accessible. So wonderful, wonderful opportunities. You should spend countless hours now not traipsing to different libraries and trying to find books and so on, but to actually do the reading. It can be accomplished nowadays with some Google searching or otherwise. You can cross-reference. Once you find a good paper, I like to do some reading on the NIH, the National Institute of Health. Has some really good papers that you can read about some very interesting actual research. The other day, the question came up about whether hemangioblastoma growth, an intracranial hemangioblastoma, should be shrinking over time post stereotactic radiosurgery, or is it okay that it basically remains the same as long as it's not getting bigger? So, here's an NIH study explicitly on intracranial hemangioblastoma tumor or growth. So it's not really a tumor per se, in the same way that a cancerous tumor would be. Is the growth over time? Should it be shrinking? Should it be, what are the results over, decades? I think one that I saw in particular that aligned with the situation we were discussing was about a 14-year window where the patient was improving and the growth eventually shrunk, but it took a long time. But as long as it's not growing and the other symptoms and the general health are improving and so on, all these good things, then that specific item, the size of the growth post exposure to stereotactic radiosurgery, which is a non-invasive treatment of such a growth, as long as the general indications are in the positive direction, and knowing that the shrinkage, the reduction in size, is not necessarily an indication, positive or negative, that it takes several years according to this research. These are all interesting things. You're not going to hear Joe Rogan talk about these things. And I would say I hate to pick on Joe Rogan, but I do not. So if you're going to do your own research, don't try to listen to what somebody said on a podcast. You can actually find real research done by real qualified professional people who are not trying to get clicks and likes, but who are doing actual research in labs, or depending on what they're doing, science or not science. But the truth is out there, to coin a phrase. So if you are able to find that first paper, and you'll see some references, some citations and references to other authors and other papers that were used and other research and so on. And you can follow those and you can read those too. Actually do the reading. Let me repeat that. Do the reading. You'll be better for it. So what can we do about this storm of motivated reasoning for profit? The advent of AI is only going to make this worse. It probably already is. There's a profit motive, so it behooves me to create content that you want to click on and watch in its entirety, and possibly even click on my merch links and my Patreon or whatever. So I want to make attractive content that keeps your eyeballs and your attention so that I make profit. It's a short-term win, but in the long term, you're like, well, Jordan Peterson is very provocative and very sensational and interesting. In his early days, interesting like 50% of the time. Now interesting like 5% of the time, maybe. But he has some nice suits and he has a lot of audience. So I guess that's a win for him. Credibility can take a shot. So the internet never forgets, which is also important. So over the years, if you decide, you know what, I'm going to start telling the truth. I'm tired of saying whatever I'm going to say for the sake of money. But your bizarre takes on things will come back. Something to be aware of. Analytical thinking is key. It is something that I think is not taught well enough. It should be encouraged. It should be taught young. There's a theory that's been posited by one of my professors from Harvey Mudd College, Dr. Benjamin. What's his name? I'm sorry, Benjamin. Yeah, Dr. Arthur Benjamin, not Benjamin. Dr. Arthur Benjamin. Math magician, does a lot of big number multiplication in his head, some other mathematical tricks. Big giant fan of combinatorial logic, proofs. Just an all-around interesting character. Backgammon champion, has a really good story about being on the Scrabble game show with Chuck Woolery. So interesting character. He posits that we should not be teaching calculus in high school. In fact, we should be teaching probability statistics, and I throw in analytical thinking. If you can understand what the numbers are telling you and how to make better decisions based on them, and that leads you away from gambling in Las Vegas, but we have 95% payoffs, you may come out ahead. So teaching specifically analytical thinking, what are sensitivity and specificity? Telling me when I see these numbers on the news, what is this interest rate and what is this distribution of wealth across these population segments? What is the geographical variance in access to resources based on demographic? All these things. You see a lot of data flying at you and nobody really knows what to make of it. So you can present any picture you want with the right numbers that sound scary. Just to adjust your axes and everything will be going your way. So I think teaching analytical thinking as part of the math and science curriculum instead of calculus, unless you're really into physics in high school, calculus is not going to get you much in high school, right? Knowing how to derive F equals MA, totally useful. You can do that in college. Really critical understanding that P equals MV. If you ever cut off a bus, coming up to a red light, you need to revisit P equals MV. Very important. So you should be a content creator. And trust me, we're getting to the end. This is the final point. Be a content creator, if only a little bit, here and there. You should provide your own opinions. You should have a response to a debate, presidential or otherwise, right? This is an election year, so it's a great time to express opinions on charged issues. You may decide to hold back a little bit for the sake of your future. Just remember, the internet never forgets. But if you actually take the time to express an opinion and you see the responses that you get, people may vehemently disagree with you, and you find yourself saying, well, yeah, but what you just said doesn't make any sense because I know what I was talking about and you don't. Or you get some really good feedback like, oh, I didn't know that. And you may change your mind, so this interaction where you are creating your content based around opinions, beliefs, research, expertise that you possess, then you will have a greater understanding of what's out there when you consume it. So if you encounter who knows what on a given day, week, or month, and you comment upon it, not necessarily snarky. You can do a TikTok video if you want to be a smart alecky, if you want to be humorous or condescending or trolling or whatever. But if you just express your opinion on something and you do it frequently and people follow you or they find your content and they express their feedback to you, or in today's day and age, somebody will clip it or they'll duet it or whatever, and they'll say, what is this idiot saying? End of the day, though, this is what people do. And when you get it from both sides, when you do content creation yourself and express your opinions, or you provide your feedback, or maybe you do a duet or you excerpt or clip and do a reaction or something, whatever you're doing, if you participate proactively in that entire process, you will come away with greater insight into what it means to say one day, I think I will create a video on something. I don't have time to do any research, so I'll just go with what I know. I will be as knowledgeable as I am at this very moment and not a bit more. And then you may hear from other people like, you are totally wrong. Maybe you'll all learn something. But I think knowing how the sausage is made may lead to a greater appreciation for the qualities of a person who is making theirs for you. So on that note, yes, we've come to the end of this very long episode. I had no idea I had this much to say on this topic. And all of it should not be believed. Or maybe some of it. I don't know. Maybe you should decide, and you can even tell me what you think. Although I make that very difficult until we have a proper website for each of my projects. So that's on me. There's an ever-growing list of distractions that a solo developer never benefits from. I will someday do an episode on cognitive load and the costs of distraction, and these only get worse. Well, maybe if you have 25 distractions and you get them all over with, nope, it doesn't work that way. Any more than 0 is detrimental. So all that said, a path to feedback, a path to live streaming, interaction, more guests, these are all on the to-do list. And it is because you are listening to this that I do such things and pursue such other things. Don't forget, buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo in the links, or you can just visit the page, https://www.buymeacoffee, all one word, .com/DanHugo. And you can also visit Ko-Fi, ko-fi.com/DanHugo, DanHugo, no spaces. You can visit either of those, especially the Buy Me a Coffee, for links, and I will update when the new websites become the primary point of publication. I have Discord servers for these things, which are unused, but YouTube channels to set up. There's all kinds of stuff on the to-do list right under the less important priority inverted distractions. And on all of those notes, I will leave you with thanks and do your research.